An explosion and gunfire could be heard coming from the Turkish aerospace industry's headquarters near the capital city of Ankara Wednesday, killing at least 4 people and wounding more than a dozen others, in what Turkey's interior minister called a terrorist attack.
Biri erkek olmak üzere
2 terrorists, one of which was a woman and one of which was a man, were neutralized.
maalesef
Unfortunately, dear friends, we have 4 martyrs. We have 14 wounded. 3 of the wounded are in critical condition.
CCTV video, confirmed by Reuters, showed armed attackers approaching the Turkish State Aviation Company building. The cause of the blast remains unclear. A state-run news agency said prosecutors have launched an investigation. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan, alongside Russia's Vladimir Putin at a BRICS conference in the Russian city of Kazan, condemned the attack and accepted Putin's condolences. NATO, the United States, and the European Union also condemned the attack. Turkish Aerospace Industries is the country's largest aerospace manufacturer, owned by the Turkish Armed Forces Foundation and government. It employs more than 10,000 people.
Donald Trump's campaign accused British Prime Minister Keir Starmer's Labour Party of blatant foreign interference in the U.S. presidential election in favor of his rival Kamala Harris. The complaint cited a now-deleted LinkedIn post from the Labour Party's head of operations, who wrote that nearly 100 current and former staff would travel to the U.S. to campaign for Harris. Trump's team filed a complaint with the Federal Election Commission calling for an investigation into what it termed, apparently, illegal contributions from the Labour Party to the Harris campaign. British political activists have long traveled to the U.S. ahead of elections, which is allowed under U.S. rules. What isn't allowed is for these volunteers to make financial contributions. The allegations of interference in this case will hinge on whether the Labour Party covered any activists' costs. Starmer said that didn't happen, and Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner gave a similar answer when asked about this in Parliament.
Will the Deputy Prime Minister join me in applauding the brave Labour staff members who've travelled across the Atlantic to campaign against Donald Trump?
People in their own time often go and campaign, and that's what we've seen. It happens in all political parties. People go and campaign, and they do what they want to do in their own time with their own money.
While the complaint could complicate U.S.-UK relations if Trump wins the election, Starmer has denied it would have any
The United
impact.
States on Wednesday said it had seen evidence that soldiers from North Korea were now in Russia. That comes amid warnings that Pyongyang may be sending troops to assist Moscow with its war in Ukraine. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, speaking in Rome, said he'd seen evidence of the mobilization, but did not yet know its objective.
What exactly they're doing, left to be seen. These are things that we need to sort out. We'll have more for you on that later. But yeah, that, as we continue to look at this, there is evidence that there are DPRK troops, in Russia.
South Korean lawmakers on Wednesday said they'd learned the North had dispatched 3,000 troops to Russia to support the war in Ukraine.
현재 추가적으로 1,500여 명이 더.
The lawmakers told journalists Pyongyang had promised to provide Moscow a total of around 10,000 troops.
총 북한군 규모는 약 3,000.
And their deployment was expected to be completed by December. Both Moscow and Pyongyang have denied reports about North Korean soldiers heading to the battlefield. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky this week called on allies to respond to evidence of North Korea's involvement in Russia's war.
If they would be sending troops to Ukraine, that would mark a significant escalation.
NATO chief Mark Rutte on Tuesday said Pyongyang's involvement would be a, quote, significant escalation. UK Defense Secretary John Healey told Parliament on Tuesday he'd seen evidence North Korean soldiers may soon be on Ukrainian battlefields.
North Korean soldiers supporting Russia's war of aggression on European soil. It is as shocking as it is desperate.
One analyst told Reuters that using North Korean soldiers would provide Moscow with desperately needed troops and Pyongyang with better training for their
Israeli
armed forces.
airstrikes pound Tyre, a historic Lebanese port city. Israel began to bomb roughly 3 hours after issuing an order online for residents to flee central areas of the UNESCO-listed city. Tens of thousands of people have fled Tyre in recent weeks. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken was in the Middle East on Wednesday to push for a halt in fighting between Israel and militant groups Hamas and Hezbollah. But there was no respite for Tyre. usually a bustling hub for Lebanon's south, with fishermen, tourists, and even UN peacekeepers on a break from deployments near the border, spending time there by the sea. And no let-up either for besieged northern Gaza, which Palestinians were fleeing en masse on Wednesday. Health authorities reported at least 20 people killed in fresh Israeli strikes. Khulud Abu Nada was among the many displaced with nowhere to go yet again.
It has been 18 days. They have implemented a siege on the north. It was like they put us in a prison. We could not leave.
We cannot take it anymore. We are being exterminated in Gaza and no one standing beside us.
In Lebanon, Israel's military said it had killed 3 Hezbollah commanders and some 70 fighters in the south in the past 48 hours, a day after confirming it had killed Hashim Safi ad-Din, the militant group's heir apparent leader.
Since October 7th, a year ago,
Blinken, in Tel Aviv before departing for Riyadh, said it was time for Israel to capitalize on its military victories. It's the last major US peace push before the November 5th presidential election, which could upend US policy in the region.
now is the time to turn those successes into an enduring strategic success. And there are really 2 things left to do. Get the hostages home and bring the war to an end with an understanding of what will follow.
This was Blinken's first Middle East trip since Israel killed Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar, a death Washington hoped could provide an impetus for peace. But Gaza residents say that since Sinwar's death, Israel has only intensified its assault on northern areas.
U.S. stocks ended lower on Wednesday, with mega-cap stocks dragging down the main indexes as investors grew less confident about future rate cuts from the Federal Reserve. The Dow and S&P 500 both finished almost 1% lower, while the Nasdaq lost more than 1.5%. Shares of McDonald's fell 5% after the CDC said an E. coli outbreak linked to the fast food restaurant's quarter-pounder hamburgers killed 1 and sickened many. Shares of Starbucks rose despite the coffee giant suspending its forecast amid falling demand for its pricey drinks. Stephen Lee is principal at Logan Capital.
The market today does seem a little bit weakness driven, somewhat by some concerns about the consumer that had been expected to be a little more resilient after the Fed rate cuts, that maybe there's some disappointment. So you're seeing some of the quick service restaurants, the McDonald's, Starbucks commentary, and some others, cast a little bit of doubt on consumer strength. So we see some of those names leading the market down. In addition, obviously, the E. coli issue with McDonald's is putting a cloud on that as well. So in general, while earnings have been okay, today's been a little bit of a disappointment versus what we've been seeing in the past week or two.
Shares of another consumer company, Coca-Cola, fell 2% after it said business in China and the Middle East was weakening. Among the rate-sensitive mega-cap stocks, Nvidia, Apple, Amazon, and Meta Platforms all lost more than 2%. The decline comes as 10-year Treasury yields reached a 3-month high, with investors reassessing the Fed rate cut outlook over the next few months, against the backdrop of strong economic data and the upcoming presidential election.
Tesla CEO Elon Musk said he expects vehicle sales to grow 20 to 30% next year. That has reassured investors the company was improving its core business of selling electric vehicles profitably. The company's bold outlook pushed Tesla shares up 12% in post-market trading on Wednesday, setting up Tesla to add about $80 billion in stock market value. Shares of Tesla's smaller EV rivals, Rivian and Lucid, both rose 2% after hours. Investors' confidence was in part lifted by a drop in the cost of making electric vehicles. Tesla's third-quarter profit margin from vehicle sales grew around 3 points to just over 17%, according to Reuters calculations. That exceeded Wall Street projections of just under 15%, according to a poll by Visible Alpha. The EV giant said that the labor and material costs of making vehicles dropped to its lowest ever level. On a conference call with analysts on Wednesday, Musk highlighted that increased profitability despite what he called a, quote, very challenging automotive environment, in which he said Tesla, to his knowledge, was the only profitable EV company. And a Tesla statement said the company would remain focused on expanding its vehicle lineup while continuing to widen its industry-leading margins. The surprising forecast appears to have eased concerns surrounding Tesla's long-awaited robo-taxi, which it unveiled at an event earlier this month. Investors slammed shares the next day for the lack of a concrete business plan, sending Tesla stock tumbling.
Boeing CEO Kelly Ortberg laid out a stark turnaround plan on Wednesday, calling for a fundamental culture change at the struggling plane maker. This comes as the company reported losses of nearly $8 billion so far this year, due in part to a crippling West Coast machinist strike that has halted production of its best-selling 737 MAX, 777, and 767 planes. In a letter to employees, Ortberg stressed the need to, quote, prevent the festering of issues and work better together after critical lapses in its performance disappointed customers and eroded public trust. Added Ortberg, quote, this is a big ship that will take some time to turn, but when it does, it has the capacity to be great again. To that end, Wednesday marks an especially crucial day for Boeing, as 33,000 striking machinists vote on its latest contract proposal. A simple majority is needed to approve the plan. The plane maker's troubles stretch back to January, when a door panel flew off an Alaska Airlines Boeing 737 MAX 9 jet in midair. Last month, the company announced sweeping plans to downsize by cutting 17,000 jobs, or 10% of its global workforce, and delaying the first delivery of its 777X jet by 1 year. It also laid out plans for a capital raise, which Reuters has reported could be around $15 billion. Ortberg on Wednesday told CNBC that Boeing is now reviewing its businesses and may end up selling some assets. Boeing shares fell about 1% in morning trading.
Coca-Cola is aiming to hit the top end of its 2024 organic sales forecast. That's after it posted a surprise rise in the third quarter sales on Wednesday, helped by a growing demand for its sodas and juices in the United States. But shares in the Sprite maker did dip mid-morning after its CEO, James Quincey, flagged a decline in volumes in China and the Middle East. For China, demand has taken a hit due to a slow economic recovery following the pandemic, caused largely by a protracted property crisis. For the Middle East, the conflict has impacted supply. Revenue also dropped in Europe, Africa and the Asia-Pacific region. But North America revenue jumped 12%. After the company's offer of 12-ounce slim cans to attract customers with tight budgets drove demand. Analysts branded this move, quote, fancy footwork to persuade drinkers to keep shelling out for premium-priced products. The drinks company expects annual organic sales to grow about 10%. Its comparable net revenue in Q3 rose 0.3% to $11.95 billion, while analysts expected a drop of more than 2.5%. Swedish carmaker Volvo on Wednesday beat expectations on third quarter operating profit, but cut its full-year sales growth forecast. That's as a slowdown in the industry spreads to higher-end cars. Volvo is banking on its new electric models, the EX30 and EX90 SUVs, to become major sellers. But general demand for EVs has weakened in the last year, due in part to a lack of affordable models and the slow rollout of charging points. Adding to the pressure is competition from lower-priced Chinese models, with automakers also bracing for the effects of European tariffs on EVs made in China. On this basis, investors are holding their breath to see if Volvo's sales aims can be achieved. Volvo said it now expects its retail sales to rise by up to 8% this year, down from a July forecast of up to 15% growth. The company has in the past been confident that demand weakness was primarily hitting the mass market, but its CEO Jim Rowan said it was now affecting the premium market, where Volvo's cars are positioned. Like others, Volvo last month stepped back from its ambitions for electrification, opting to continue selling new hybrids for longer than planned. It also scaled down its profit margin goal, aiming to outgrow the premium car market, rather than give a specific sales target, as before. McDonald's shares fell in pre-market trading on Wednesday after an E. coli outbreak linked to the restaurant's Quarter Pounder sandwiches left one person dead in the US. Officials said the outbreak across 10 states has also sickened 49 people and sent 10 to the hospital. Cases were reported starting in September and have continued in October. In the past, 2 notable E. coli outbreaks at fast food restaurants Chipotle and Jack in the Box significantly hit their sales. And the same E. coli strain in the McDonald's outbreak was linked to the 1993 Jack in the Box incident, which killed 4 children. McDonald's said it has pulled the Quarter Pounder hamburger from the menu in the affected areas. Based on initial findings, it said the outbreak could have been caused by the slivered onions used in the Quarter Pounders. The onions were sourced from a single supplier that serves 3 distribution centres. Analysts said fourth quarter sales could see some pressure from the outbreak, but it's too early to note if it would be worse than the 2 previous E. coli cases. Analysts added that the outbreak's timing was bad news for McDonald's, as its US comparable sales had started accelerating following the launch of $5 value meals.
Among the members of this orchestra in Sweden is a robot playing the cello. It's the first time in music history a robot has performed such a feat, according to composer Jacob Mulrad. Combining industrial robotic arms with 3D printed parts, the robot cello was designed and developed by researcher and composer Fredrik Gran. Mulrad says it does not employ artificial intelligence, but was programmed by Gran using Mulrad's musical score specially written for the robot.
That he actually worked with 2 industrial robot arms that could play the cello. And I thought that was very interesting because, there's obviously a lot of self-playing pianos, but the string instrument is so intricate. So I was, very curious about how it actually works. And I asked him if the robotic cello ever been played with an orchestra before, and it hadn't.
The robot played at Malmo Live Concert Hall alongside the Malmo Symphony Orchestra. As a composer, Mulrad is known for blending classical music with modern influences. He said writing music for a robot helped him explore his creativity.
For me as a composer, it's kind of liberating to go beyond the human anatomy when you think about what to write for a cello.
Mulrad said incorporating AI is something being considered for future projects. Despite the possibilities, he said he doesn't see a world where human musicians are replaced by bots.
I'm not scared. I don't think, I think human curiosity is inevitable and it's so strong, but I don't think it will ever replace live musicians. That's impossible, I think.
This is Tardus, a tractor powered by electricity. It's a rarity. Agricultural machines typically run on diesel fuel, and major manufacturers have so far hardly sold any e-tractors. Thaddeus and Johanna Bayer in Germany want to change that. Thaddeus was inspired by the solar panels on the roofs of various farms. He hopes the Tardus can cut down on energy use and significantly cut running costs.
If I mechanize it in the vehicle, it costs me perhaps 10 cents per wheel. If I generate the same from diesel, I'm looking at around 50 cents, almost 5 times what it costs me to generate my own electricity. This vehicle drives incredibly economically and efficiently.
Unglaublich wirtschaftlich und effizient.
The prototype is currently being tested on a farm in Bavaria. Farmer Franz Oberreisenbuchner has been using the Tardus for almost a year. His farm's solar panels provide the electricity that powers the tractor.
In my opinion, the advantages clearly outweigh the disadvantages. Firstly, there are cost savings because we no longer have to buy diesel and can generate the electricity we need ourselves with our photovoltaic systems. At the same time, the tractor can refuel from the electricity that we would otherwise only feed into the grid at a low price. So we can really count on a favourable electricity price.
The electric tractor can be used for 5 to 10 hours on a single charge, but there is a trade-off. the intensity of the work has to be taken into account. While many everyday tasks can be carried out well with the e-tractor, it is not suitable for very intense work with heavy machinery such as ploughing, and charging the battery can take up to 8 hours. If there is urgent work to be done on the tractor, owners can also replace the battery with an exchangeable one. Here's Johanna Bayer.
If we now compare ourselves with conventional tractors in the premium segment, we can say they cost around 180,000 to 200,000 euros. And if we take into account the existing subsidies from the Ministry of Agriculture, we will be around 35% more expensive. However, it is important to note that the operating costs of our tractor are reduced so much that these additional costs are recouped within 2,000 to 3,000 operating hours. And from then on, you only save money.
At least 15 to 20 people living inside the building were labourers. The building collapsed upon them. Some of them were inside the building, while some were inside the shed near the building. The building has fallen on the shed as well.
Hello?
I'm well. My artwork is a portrait of Alan Turing, the brilliant British mathematician who laid the foundation for modern computing and artificial intelligence. The portrait has a fractured and layered quality, reflecting our current fragmented and multifaceted worlds.
I think what is particularly remarkable about this event with Ada coming to Sotheby's is actually the picture AI God. We are absolutely in that transitional point of going from a human world where humans make all the decisions to a post-human world where the algorithms are starting to make all the decisions. And we are in that tipping point. And I think actually to highlight that with the ultimate expression, AI God, is a really good way of actually showing that significance as we transition.